Thank you for tuning in to IFES on Elections. I'm Laura Osio. As people across the Middle East and North Africa continue to protest for greater freedom and equality, we are constantly reminded that the struggle for liberty is not just about overthrowing autocratic rulers. It is also about individual rights. The 100th anniversary of International Women's Day, celebrated on March 8th, is a good time to remember that women in the MENA region could gain the most from reform. Lauren Serpe, research officer at IFES Applied Research Center, talks to us about the status of women in Yemen and what the current anti-government protests could mean for the advancement of their cause. Lauren, IFES has been working on a project to assess where women stand politically, economically, and socially in the MENA region. Would you please tell us about this work?
The Status of Women in the Middle East and North Africa project is a project that gathers data that is identified by local women's advocates as data needed for their efforts. The data is then presented to them, and they are trained on how to use the data to push for the reforms that their organizations advocate for.
What have the surveys revealed about the status of women in Yemen?
Well, in Yemen, some of the findings were actually pretty surprising. There was majority support, albeit a bare majority, but a majority of support for the introduction of gender quotas in the form of reserved seats for women in parliament. There was also nearly 3/4 of support on behalf of Yemeni women and men to introduce a minimum marriage age law for girls.
The finding that 3/4 of the population would support establishing a minimum marriage age law is very positive. What does this say about the possibility of improving the status quo for women in Yemen?
Well, this finding is very positive. The 72% is a number that was surprising to us. While there's other data that shows attitudinal hurdles that women still would have to overcome, this is still positive. It's still a starting point. In fact, the NGOs that we work with in country were thrilled to receive this data and could not wait to put this data, these numbers, behind their continuing advocacy efforts, particularly for the minimum marriage age law. Now, apart from the data, it's important to note that women have also been very courageous by being on the streets and protesting. Last year, women turned out to protest for minimum marriage age laws to push for the passing of that law. And also, women have been out in the streets in the recent anti-government protests.
You mentioned that women have been participating in the anti-government protests. What do these protests mean for the advancement of women's rights?
Well, it's a very exciting time in Yemen and the rest of the Middle East and North Africa. I think there's a new political space opening that presents an excellent opportunity for women to push for change. It's very important for both Yemenis and international actors to insist that women are at the table during all of these talks and negotiations for reform. To conclude, the data shows Yemeni women and men are open to certain political and legal reforms, as we spoke about the minimum marriage age law. And anybody interested in women reform in Yemen should take this unprecedented opportunity to capitalize on that.
Thank you, Lauren. For more on IFES on elections, please visit www.ifes.org.